Hey y'all, so today I'm going to be doing my July wrap-up. First of all, sorry in advance if the lighting is really weird. It's strangely bright outside today and I can't get anything to work, so if the lighting is weird throughout the video, I'm so sorry. So the month of July was very up and down for me in terms of reading because I was reading a lot at the beginning of the month and a lot in like the middle to end of the month, and I wasn't really reading very much during the rest of the month. But I did manage to read 5 books in the month of July, so I'm going to be talking about them in this video. So the first book that I read in July was The Selection by Kiera Cass. I'm not going to talk about it too much in this video because I did do a full video, which will be linked up in the cards, that is called Hate Reading The Selection. Essentially, I decided to read this book because it seemed like a really fun book to read and make light of, and so that's what I did. And I already have a full video where I read the book and did updates as I was reading, and then did a little mini discussion about it at the end. So like I said, that will be linked in the cards, and I won't talk about it too much here. So I gave The Selection 2 out of 5 on Goodreads, which I translated to something like 5 stars out of 10. Essentially, it was really fun to read and make light of, but I didn't think that it was well written. I thought the writing wasn't very strong, the characters were very annoying, the world build was really flimsy, I thought that there were a lot of inherently sexist things in the book. It just had a ton of problems. And although I didn't really like the book at all and I thought it was not a very good book, I had a ton of fun reading it, so I would definitely recommend that you check out that video on Hate Reading The Selection. So then after reading The Selection, I didn't actually read anything until the Booktubeathon started. And the first book that I read in the Booktubeathon was The Iron Trial by Cassandra Clare and Holly Black. I had been meaning to read this book for quite a while because it's written by one of my favorite authors, and it's a magic school book, which is one of my favorite things, and it was constantly compared to Harry Potter, so despite thinking that it wouldn't live up to the Harry Potter hype, I did really want to check this out. Essentially, in the story, the main character, Callum, really doesn't want to go to the Magisterium. His dad has raised him to hate wizards of any kind, and Callum wants nothing to do with the school. And so when the test to get into the school, the Iron Trial, comes up, Callum tries to throw it and not get into the school, but of course he does. And all of this silliness ensues. I ended up giving The Iron Trial 8 stars out of 10. This is a middle grade book and it definitely reads as such, and I feel like there were certain aspects that were a little flimsy and felt like they were a little dumbed down for the middle grade audience, which I don't think is a thing that is necessary for middle grade books. There were also times when it felt very reminiscent of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, but I wasn't really sure if that was something that was unavoidable as a book that is the first in a series set at a magic school, or if that was something that was a problem due to the writers kind of being inspired by Harry Potter. That being said, I did think that it was a fun read, and I did enjoy it enough to give it like the lowest end of 4 stars out of 5, which for me is 8 stars out of 10. My next read was Peril at End House by Agatha Christie. This is one of the books in her Poirot series, and in this book, Poirot meets a young woman named Nick, who he realizes has had several accidents in the days leading up to this book, and she thinks that they're just pure happenstance, but Poirot thinks that they could be something a little bit more sinister. Overall, this is probably one of my favorite Poirot novels that I've read to date. Most of the Poirot novels that I read tend to fall in the like high 3 out of 5 star range, so like 7 stars out of 10 and 7.5 stars out of 10, but this one I ended up giving 4 stars out of 5, which I think I translated to 8 stars out of 10. One of my biggest complaints about Poirot novels in general is that the reader has trouble following along and picking up clues and figuring out the mystery as Poirot does, because at the end of the books, Poirot usually tends to take a leap of logic that only someone who is as smart as Poirot can make, so the readers are typically kind of left in the dark until he reveals something at the end. But in this book, I was definitely at least partially able to follow along with him and pick up on some of the hints that were left throughout. There was still at least a little bit of a logic leap near the end, but everything else throughout the book I was kind of able to keep up and to figure out what was going on. And on top of that, it was a really intriguing and clever mystery with lots of twists and turns throughout, so I really enjoyed that. And then after finishing Peril at End House, I moved on to The Body in the Library by Agatha Christie, which is one of her Miss Marple mysteries. So far, nearly all of my Agatha Christie reads, except of course And Then There Were None, have been Poirot mysteries, so this was my first foray into Miss Marple. Essentially, in this book, a couple wake to find that a body is in the library in their home, and Miss Marple is kind of called onto the scene as like this hometown sleuth to help the woman of the house kind of deduce what's going on while the police also try to run an investigation. I ended up giving The Body in the Library 3 stars out of 5. I think I went somewhere around like 6.5 to 7 stars out of 10. I enjoyed it, but I would definitely say that after reading this first Miss Marple mystery for me, that I prefer the Poirot novels. Obviously, I definitely need to give it 1 or 2 more chances before I definitively say that I like Poirot better, but I felt like a lot of the mystery and the sleuthing was surrounding the detectives as they figured stuff out, and we only got short little scenes from Miss Marple kind of putting things together. And while that's definitely something that I enjoyed reading, I went into this expecting to follow a detective around as they worked either with or separately from the police, trying to figure things out as they went along, and what I really got was like 75% police, 25% Marple. And while as the detective of the story, she was several steps ahead of them in figuring things out, I really would have preferred to watch her for most of the book rather than the detectives. But overall, as usual, this was a solid Agatha Christie novel, and I did in the end enjoy it, and that's why it got 3 out of 5, or like 6.5, 7 out of 10. And finally, the last book that I read in July, which technically I finished the first day of August, was Off to Be the Wizard by Scott Meyer. So essentially, our main character Martin is somewhat of a hacker. Like, he doesn't like break into banks or anything, I don't know, but he kind of peruses the internet and changes things for fun just because he thinks that it's entertaining. And one day he stumbles across this really large file, and he discovers that there's information about people on this file and that he's on this file, and when he starts messing with it, he realizes that he's altering reality. So essentially he continues messing with this file and he starts getting into trouble for this, and he decides that the best way out of this trouble is to send himself back to medieval England. And in medieval England, he decides to pose as a wizard and use this file to do magic. That sounds like really confusing and weird, but it's actually this really endearing story, and I really enjoyed it. Our main character Martin is kind of the typical lovable geek. He's a little bit of a disaster and he's kind of all over the place, but it's really fun to watch his adventures. Overall, I ended up really enjoying this book. I think I gave it either 8 or 8.5 stars out of 10, which translates to 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. Overall, this is kind of a fun historical fiction fantasy book that is actually kind of set in technology, and it's this really interesting combination of genres. So those are the 5 books that I read in the month of July. I know I didn't do a lot of reading in July, but I got really into Big Brother and I didn't do much else. Let me know down in the comments what you think of any of these books that I've talked about. Let me know what your favorite book that you read in July was. I would love to know and talk about it with you down in the comments. As always, I will leave links down in the description to my blog, Twitter, and Goodreads. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I would love to be friends with all of you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!